Anyway, so I've made this video a few times in a row, trying to keep it together, but it's been terrible. So I'm basically going to get into it now, and be sorry. I'm sorry if I keep saying basically. I just can't help myself. But you'll recall that last night I made a video. If you've been watching this crap from what I've been putting out, or if you're going to, that talked about the Black Lives Matter riots and the I guess the protests as well, and how this has all come together and what it's caused. And I've talked about what I thought the response should have been, and response should have been from Trump, and what the response should have been that basically would have been good for strategy and campaign strategy. And not just sort of campaign strategy, but to keep the polls on his side. And he hasn't done it, hasn't worked. And I said last night, I concluded that I think it was fatal. Things have changed. Anyway, I'm going to go into that now. Okay, so what happened last night, which would have been daytime for America, is that a precinct was overrun by protesters and rioters. And they declared it a cop-free zone, and it was so hectic that the police in there said that they're just going to abandon it, and so this is too unsafe, like too unsafe for the public, safety services, which is them, the law enforcement, to continue there. Okay, so there's no police, there is no police sovereignty to that area anymore. Okay, a precinct. This is not like a state, like a police station or whatever. This is a precinct. That is a big deal. Okay, and why this is a kind of like a turning point here is because that has set a precedent. Because now, not only have the protesters and rioters been able to overrun and force a capitulation from the administrators, and which is basically encapsulated by the governors and the mayors who have folded and now are doing very reactive reforms. They not only have they been able to get like police to do like, I don't know, like weird shit, how they sit on a knee and stuff. They've kind of got some of them to do that. Not only have they got a lot of police to now sort of like resign, they've now actually been effective in what is sort of can be now aligned to like an uprising that has stolen sovereignty from domestic security services. That is a big deal. And I concluded last night that I thought Trump was out of the race now because of his mismanagement. And in a nutshell, that was because he didn't acknowledge the issue in the right way. It was tone deaf. He talked about law enforcement rather than talking about law enforcement as the problem, and the Black Lives Matter thing being understandable and showing compassion or showing anything that acknowledged it. Okay, which he could have done in a decent way that still made him look hard, but effectively he didn't do that. It's been mismanaged. Polls have moved against him. And I concluded that that was too far, because by not doing that, he would have been perceived not only as immoral, because that really affects the Democrats, and it also affects kind of the independents, because it's like so unsympathetic, but that he can't handle a crisis. So he is not a crisis leader. He cannot manage this country effectively. It goes into the narrative of how he mishandled COVID, and this was just all chaos, and has just been the chaos candidate for the last 3 years. It's like, it's just too far at this point. We need to get rid of him. We need to get back to normality. And that the way the Democrats were handling it, even though it was a lot of paneling and being sympathetic, it was still them acknowledging it, and it still looks more like that they were the more mature side to handle this going forward. Okay, and Trump was the chaos candidate, and the Republicans were just ignoring it and talking more about how they support law enforcement, they're not going to do defunding, and that they want law and order and whatnot. Okay, and talking about evangelicals and doing this crazy shit like standing in front of church with a Bible, just idiotic. Okay, tone deaf, it didn't work, and looked like it was not going to work. Okay, I said if you now, what has happened now is because they've overrun this precinct, it basically is a very, very good. It's a huge precedent, because they've now been shown that behaviour pays off. Okay, rioting and hectic protests can actually effectively get them to overrun the sovereignty of security forces. You know that they're for defunding, which I found out now means basically replacing a lot of the police, so removing them and getting a lot of sort of like social services and that kind of thing going in there, and that sort of blending with whoever is security services, and they just want the cops gone. Okay, the Black Lives Matter movement, they haven't had any power, but now they're getting it. They've done protests in the past, but this one is on another level. They're getting back at the police, they're taking back their ground, and they're the ones who are having the power. And they're fanatical about it, and they're going for it, and it's working a lot. From their point of view, the system has pushed down on them. And now the system is folding because of their behaviour. And all the leftist type people who are on their side, the radical left, and all the kind of people who have radical left ideas but are just getting on it because it's cool, are now seeing that this works. And the key to that is they want the system to be destroyed. And now the system is being destroyed, and they're getting paid off for it. Okay? So I don't see any reason for them to stop now because they're actually getting rewarded for this, and it's showing that their pressure is getting the police to literally disband now, rather than them having to wait for to show their solidarity and then put pressure on politicians to do the reforms and then sort of like move through that. They're being shown just by pure force and will and riots and protests, they can get them to fold right now, and they have a lot of motivation to continue. And the reason this is bad, going back to what I had suggested Trump should have done in the first place, is because they're folded now, the administrators and whatnot, and the police even now. It's saying what should have happened. They should have clamped down hard, so it didn't, and then offered like a public display of the immediate people who were to blame, like the cops who were involved in the Floyd case and various others, and basically sacrificed them to show that they were addressing the issue, and then at the same time talking about reforms, and then sort of putting on the platter what they were going to do. They should have done that, because if they'd done that right now, the protesters obviously would have been clamped down hard, but they would have seen that, okay, so the reforms, and shown that they'd already put into place an action against it. And then that gives them incentive to stop, because they now see, okay, well, what's on the table then? They see that their protest has paid off. And in addition to that, it's now like they could potentially lose something, because they've cracked down so hard. They're like, okay, well, they did this, and maybe it's like, if we keep misbehaving, they'll take that away. And what this analogy can be likened to is like, if you've got that child in a supermarket or whatever, and you become the parent who will always fold when that child will nag you and behave really, really like crazy to get the lollies and get the toys, and you just let them do it. And they now see they've been rewarded for that behavior, okay? This is what is a good analogy for this. And this is why you don't just fold. You crack down hard and then show what you're going to do immediately. That's what they should have done. They haven't done it. And now this movement is saying that this behavior is the most effective means to get what they want. And what they want is very extreme. Now, so far, the independents and the moderates and whatnot have sort of been on this side. And they're sort of showing, okay, so the Democrats are now acknowledging it. Trump has not been acknowledging it, has not been sympathetic. He's not talked about the police brutality. He's talked about how the police should be supported, which is tone deaf, which means in their minds, he's not handling this a way that is actually going to like ease the tensions. What he is focused on is just the issue that is just going to aggravate it, which makes him look like a bad leader and him not being able to handle a crisis, which makes his polls go down. They want someone who can handle it. So far, the Democrats have acted like the more mature ones, and they've shown that they're the ones who are going to like pander and whatnot, which shows that they understand the issue, right? They understand the issue, which is more responsible. Because they understand the issue, they can address the issue, and if they address the issue, it'll make this stop. But this is a turning point, and it's a turning point for Trump. I concluded last night that he was out of this, not much anymore. And the reason is because they've been rewarded this behavior, and it's so aggressive and chaotic, and they've now gotten a precedent for that they can basically completely take over a jurisdiction and an area completely and remove all the security forces. It's like, so even like there's no reason for them to stop now. Okay, and they were already pissed off. They were already angry for a lot of reasons and venting on this and trying to push reforms and just have so much pent up hatred. Okay, and it's so fanatical, not just the Black Lives Matter people who've got a pretty good reason, but the leftist people who've jumped on board this, who are like, want to basically destroy the system and make a new one. There's no reason for them to stop now. And the thing is, if they keep going, like so far, the public's point of view would be, okay, they've done this. We kind of agree with their sentiment. It's fair enough, but they're going to do it. And then they sort of like will get offered reforms. They'll start doing them and they'll stop. But the thing is now, why would they stop? Because they're getting the payoff right now. All of it. They don't have to wait for defunding, which they want. They don't have, which I've found out that defunding is in their eyes is basically to get rid of most cops or a lot of cops and replace it with like social service type people to deal with it. But they're getting rid of the cops now. They've just abandoned a precinct, and I don't see why they wouldn't try to get them to abandon more precincts. And they filled up a town hall. They're overrunning all the institutions, right? That is eventually the public is going to go, okay, we thought, sure, understandable. And they'll acknowledge the issues, and then they'll start creating reforms, and then they'll be like, okay, we've protested, you've like in this case capitulated, but they'll see it as, okay, they've acknowledged the issue, and now they've said the reforms. But I don't even think that they're going to stop now, even with the fact that they've promised reforms. I just think that they're going to there's a good chance they'll just keep going. Okay, and why wouldn't they? And they're also extremists, And on the Black Lives Matter side, they're so pissed off and they're so against the system and think it's so against them that right now they're overrunning it and finally like getting it back for themselves. Right, immediately, right now, everyone is letting them get away with it. They're getting bailed out of jail. They're not getting any penalties for it. They're getting complete sympathy for it. The media's on their side. The Democrats are on their side. They are literally being cheered on by the crowd to basically like take over like territory, like an uprising, right? An internal uprising. Now, if that keeps going, and the public opinion is going to be like the moderates and independents go, okay, wait a second. We thought if you protested and they started promising reforms and moving stuff around and capitulating, you'd start like get it going away now. But no, it's like that's not the most direct path to them getting the reward. Now they've just been shown that the best direct reward path for their reward without any consequences is to just attack and continue to attack. And if that keeps happening in other precincts and other areas where like literally the cops just disband and disappear, right, and pull out for safety issues and just say fuck this, it's going to put it. The public is eventually going to be more supportive, or the public will be less sympathetic, and the public will be less willing, I believe, to think that just acknowledging the issue, as maybe the Dems have done, and saying okay, we feel for the issue and now we're going to address the issue, isn't going to actually be the road to normality and order again. And at that point, Trump, all he needs to do is just let this play out. And he's so far been hammering on law and order, law and order, law and order. We're not going to defund. We're not going to defund, which I thought was so tone deaf. But if this keeps going and they're like, okay, it's going to continue going, they're actually starting to see the consequences of this and how far it can go, and it continues to go like that, they're eventually going to start thinking, okay, who is the more responsible one? Because clearly the DNC and whatnot are letting this happen and encouraging it for the most part, or not stopping it. It's starting to look like they're actually more risky than the Republican side. And they're not idiots. They're going to figure out pretty quickly that they've picked a good moment based on public opinion and where it's gone to then crack down and send in National Guard and restore order. Okay? When these things happen through history, they always have a counter reaction that goes to more authoritarianism. And this won't do, I don't think this will do it like in a major way that creates like a dictatorship or like Napoleon's situation, that bringing back the Bourbon regime or whatever. I think that this will just mean that they actually start supporting and thinking that the more responsible option is a crackdown, because it's like, okay, you guys have gotten what you want, and you're just taking it too far now. And Trump can be that guy. And if he beats that guy, I think in that time the polls start going for him more, and I think that they go for him more, probably more because they probably still hold him accountable for being the chaos candidate. Probably more because they actually start going against the Democrats, because they're starting to think, they will start thinking potentially that they're kind of like, because they're egging it on, they're actually the less likely group of people and group of like administrators and politicians to be able to actually stop this and to bring back order. And if that happens, it's going to go back to Trump, and then he's in with a real chance to get back in with this. Okay? But obviously he will need to crack down and stop it. Okay, at that point. And the Republicans are probably thinking right now, how's that going to happen? How can we make that unfold? But with that precinct, that's a red line, man. That's like a big deal. Because, I mean, yeah, fuck yeah, this is cool. Yeah, we're finally getting them back. Yeah, fuck the system. It's like, just keep going, man. Like, why not? I would be doing that, especially if I was like a fanatic, especially if I thought the system needed to be broken down. Because they believe in institutional racism. They believe that the institutions are inherently like oppressive. So for them, any chance to destroy the system as much as possible and get exactly what they want and take it all back is something that they'll keep doing. And they're not only being allowed to do it, they're being encouraged for it. Okay? The politicians should not have folded. They should have cracked down hard and then immediately put on display the people that they were going to hold accountable in a very big way, and then talked about reforms then. Because then it would have been like, no, that behavior is not acceptable, right? But we are going to deal with the issue because we acknowledge the issue is a very valid issue. Then the protesters have something to lose, and then they can also step back and go, okay, well, what's on the table, right? They haven't done that. And if this keeps going, and I think it will keep going, and it goes on long enough, the public are going to lose sympathy for him. And it's just going to be Trump to have to step in for the rescue. And I don't know if it will be enough for the election, but I think it will put it in a position where he's back in the running. And I also think it will put it in a position where the Democrats are going to start making mistakes. Because this whole time, them not really knowing which side they support or what they're going to do about it is I think the Republicans are just going to attack them for it. And I don't know how they'll do that, but I think that they'll just try something, or they'll just do something stupid. The worst thing they could do then is flip-flop really hard and then be like, okay, no, we're going to be the ones who crack down. Because then the protesters and everyone in the public looks like now they're going to looks like now they're just all over the place and they can't handle the crisis, right? Because it looks like they don't even know what the fuck they're going to do. They just keep flip-flopping. Doesn't look good. Trump actually hasn't done that either. Now, that I think has been a good thing. I think that despite that the problem, because he hasn't addressed the problem, then it hasn't cured it. But I think flip-flopping would have been worse. And I think that this is actually keeping him in the running if he keeps talking about no defunding and eventually cracking down. And the riots shouldn't be happening. We'll see. If this goes on another 2 to 4 weeks, this is going to be great for him. Okay? Republicans will not be able to believe their luck. And I said last night that Trump is a bit of a tin ass. Yo, man, like maybe he's going to continue to tin it. And we know as well, especially if he cracks down and it works, right? So he's finally been rewarded for this. And COVID starts disbanding. He starts talking about the economy again. He starts pinning the economy to Biden. What's Biden going to do, right? Then he has to debate him, I'm pretty sure. Biden's going to look like he can't, like at that point, the public is really going to wake up to the fact that Biden is an old man who is senile and looks like he's got early onset dementia. Hey man, that could be enough. It might not quite be enough, but if something else comes up, it's probably going to be more than enough. And I think he's going to get in again, and that's just going to be mayhem. But that's the update. All Trump needs to do here, in summary, for strategy, is to just let it happen. And the Democrats, I'm not entirely sure. I think that they need to, I really don't know what they need to do. I think that they need to appease it as they're doing. I think they need to talk about real reform and just hope that this ends and slows down, right? Because if it doesn't, and Trump can put it on them and basically say that the sympathy and talking about defunding reform approach hasn't worked, so me cracking down, and that's seen to be the thing that will work, it's just going to flip. It's going to make it look like the Democrats are the more risky option, that they're the less qualified group to be able to handle a crisis like this. And Joe Biden, where the fuck has this guy been? Is this guy going to be a leader if this continues? No. So that's what I see happening. Anyway, I'll keep you updated. Keep watching the news. You can see what happens if another precinct collapses or another thing with police just starts disbanding and they start taking more turf. No jurisdiction turf. Hey man, I think that's going to be enough if it continues to basically turn public opinion against them. So anyway, stay tuned. I'll give you updates.